Step back into the swirling tapestry of early America, a landscape stitched together by ambition, conflict, faith, and the raw dreams of settlers searching for a new beginning. These lands, stretching from the frost-bitten woods of New England down to the steaming marshes of the Carolinas, became home to some of the most remarkable stories in history. In the mid-1600s, as the Atlantic winds battered the sails of wooden ships and whispered through the new settlements, the Dutch held powerful sway in the region they called New Amsterdam. Here on the tip of Manhattan Island, traders, merchants, sailors, and adventurers from across the Atlantic built a bustling hub, a place of opportunity where barrels brimming with furs, tobacco, and sugar rolled off ships onto cobbled streets. The air was thick with a mix of languages, faiths, and customs. The Dutch, pragmatic and profit-minded, were tolerant of diversity in their colony. Jews, Catholics, French Huguenots, Africans, and Native Americans mingled, sometimes peacefully, sometimes uneasily, but always in the frenetic rhythm of trade and survival. Yet this northern outpost teetered in the balance. For across the sea, the English eyed the Dutch stronghold with envy, desiring its wealth and its strategic location. In 1664, without the roar of cannons or the clash of swords, the English fleet sailed into the harbor, demanding New Amsterdam's surrender. Peter Stuyvesant, the wooden-legged governor, hoped to muster resistance, but the town's residents, weary of his stern rule and tempted by promises of moderation, opened the gates. The Dutch flag was furled away, and the city was reborn as New York in honor of the king's brother, the Duke of York. Yet Dutch influence would linger for generations. In street names, customs, and the city's lasting spirit of tolerance. Farther south and to the west, another experiment in tolerance was unfolding. Pennsylvania, the land of Penn's woods, had been granted by King Charles II to William Penn, a wealthy and visionary Englishman, and above all else, a Quaker. The Quakers, or the Religious Society of Friends, were radical in their insistence on equality and peace. Rejecting the rigid hierarchies of church and society, they shook in the presence of the divine, listening for the inner light in each soul. For this, they were reviled in England, jeered at in the streets, and sometimes beaten and thrown into jail. Penn envisioned his colony as a holy experiment, a refuge for the persecuted, a place where faiths could coexist in peace. He advertised widely across Europe, inviting Germans, Welsh, Dutch, and Swedes to settle. In Pennsylvania, laws were crafted with an eye to fairness. There would be no official church, and even relations with Native Americans were marked by Penn's treaties, written in trust, and a rare respite from the violence endemic elsewhere. Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, soon flourished under these ideals, its grid of streets humming with new arrivals eager for religious freedom, fertile land, and the promise of equality. Meanwhile, on the steamy coasts of the South, another drama played out in the colony of South Carolina. Here, English settlers joined with French Huguenots, Barbadian planters, and enslaved Africans, carving plantations out of the tangled forests and tidal swamps. Rice, indigo, and, eventually, cotton became the colony's lifeblood. But Carolina society was strikingly hierarchical. At the top were powerful landowners, sometimes absentee lords living in England, and beneath them, the enslaved Africans whose labor transformed wild marshes into fields of gold. But 800 miles to the north, in the cramped, smoky settlements of the Chesapeake Bay, a different kind of tension brewed. In Virginia, wealth and power were concentrated in the hands of a few, the planter elite who harvested tobacco by the ton. Yet as thousands of former indentured servants gained their freedom, they found themselves squeezed out of good land and political power by this tight-knit aristocracy. One man, Nathaniel Bacon, rose up, voicing the frontier's grievances. Too many taxes, too little protection from Native American raids, and too much power in the hands of the governor, William Berkeley. In a fiery revolt in 1676, Bacon and his followers torched Jamestown and sent the colony's elite fleeing. The rebellion was quashed with Bacon's sudden death, but its scars ran deep, planted seeds of discontent that would shape American ideas of liberty and resistance. Amid shifting allegiances and growing tension, the English crown sought to tighten its grip. King James II merged several northern colonies into an unwieldy unit, the Dominion of New England. Autocratic, unpopular, and dismissive of local rights, its governor, Sir Edmund Andros, was hated by colonists, especially rigid Puritans who saw their religious freedoms and local self-rule slipping away. After James was overthrown in the Glorious Revolution of 1688, angry colonists detained Andros and dissolved the Dominion, restoring their cherished assemblies. Parliament, now mindful of colonial resentment, passed the Toleration Act of 1689, granting limited religious freedom to Protestants, though not to Catholics or Jews, signaling a new era of negotiation between the mother country and its colonies. Yet for all its ideals and ambitions, colonial society was often fraught with anxiety and suspicion. Nowhere was this more horrifyingly revealed than in Salem, Massachusetts, in 1692 during the infamous witch trials. Fear, religious extremism, and personal vendettas blended into a feverish storm. Accusations darted through the town like lightning. Women, especially those who were elderly, poor, or outspoken, were accused of consorting with the devil. Hysteria swept the Puritan parish, leading to mass arrests and the execution of 20 people, most of them women. The trials, rooted in social tension and religious paranoia, left an indelible stain, a cautionary tale about the dangers of fanaticism and unchecked authority. Yet beneath these high dramas, colonial America's everyday life was shaped by mundane but powerful forces: economics and social structure. Across the colonies, cash crops, tobacco in Virginia, rice and indigo in the Carolinas, wheat in Pennsylvania, and shipping and fishing in New England defined fortunes and futures. The mercantile system demanded that the colonies supply raw materials to England while buying back finished goods at a profit to the mother country. In bustling ports like Boston, New York, and Charleston, ships carried goods and people, weaving the colonies into the worldwide web of British trade. At the same time, the infamous triangular trade brought untold suffering. Slaves captured in Africa endured the Middle Passage, shipped in appalling conditions to toil in American fields and homes. Their labor underpinned not just the prosperity of the South, but fortunes in the North as well. Colonial society was built on layers of inequality, not only between black and white, but between rich and poor, free and unfree, women and men. Yet within these hierarchies, society took shape according to deeply ingrained customs. In New England, society revolved around tight-knit towns, governed by church and town meetings, where neighbors both supported and policed each other. In the South, grand plantations stood apart, and the elite modeled themselves on English country gentry, while poor whites and enslaved people toiled below. In the middle colonies, the diversity of origins and faiths made for less rigid social boundaries and more vibrant community life, but also constant negotiation among different groups. Women's roles in colonial America, too, were bounded by expectation but vital to survival. From dawn until darkness, women labored alongside men, tending gardens, spinning wool, churning butter, raising children, and sometimes managing entire farms or shops in the absence of husbands. For most, legal rights were sharply circumscribed. Married women, under coverture, had little control over property or income, dependent on husbands or male relatives. Yet within churches and families, women wielded quiet but powerful influence, transmitting values, faith, and culture from one generation to the next. Some women, like Anne Hutchinson in Massachusetts or Margaret Fell among the Quakers, challenged the boundaries. The Quakers in particular were radical for their day, insisting on spiritual equality for women, who preached and led meetings. Even in other colonies, widows who survived husbands sometimes emerged as powerful property holders, managing businesses and estates with grit and skill. But all were bound together by the hopes, fears, and tireless labor that built and sustained colonial society. They prayed in modest meeting houses and towering churches, celebrated harvests, mourned losses, and watched, year after year, as the American world changed around them. New ideas filtered in, of liberty, of rights, of governance by the people. And from the crowded wharves of New York to the open fields of Pennsylvania, from the sugar plantations of South Carolina to the piney woods of New England, the seeds of a new nation stirred quietly in the colonial soil, destined to bloom with revolution and transformation in the years to come. Thus, the story of the colonies unfolds, a story of outsiders and visionaries, rebels and rulers, the brave, the bold, and the forgotten. Their struggles, triumphs, and tragedies echo across the centuries, inviting us still to wonder, what does it mean to build a new world? In these stories of Quakers and Dutch merchants, Carolina planters, rebellious Virginians, and the haunted women of Salem, we glimpse both the promise and peril of America's colonial past.